celebrating civility and diversity, y'all.
Yes, yes.
How many ministers does it take to record a video?
Okay, I think that we are recording now. All right. Thank you all for being here this evening. Glad that you are with us. This is Religious Life Campus Ministry, and this is part of our, we call it our Interfaith Dialogue Gathering, a virtual cafe. The virtual cafe is typically, when we do it, it's 11 o'clock in the morning, and we invite folks to bring their donuts, their coffee, or whatever they desire to munch on while they are sharing in conversation. On this evening, we thought that it would be most appropriate as we engaged in this interfaith panel that it be during this week. This week is we are celebrating Civility Week and understanding as we reach out to various communities and the world that we live in today, that it would be wonderful and amazing if we understand that we can communicate. Diversity comes in various forms. It's not just religious diversity, or rather ethnic, racial diversity, but there is religious diversity. Something that we often tend to want to stray away from, but something that we very much ought to engage in. So on this evening, we want to engage in wonderful dialogue as we explore the various faith traditions that we have with us on this evening. To lead us and to moderate this evening is going to be none other than Dr. James Kraft. Dr. James Kraft is a part of the faculty here on the HT campus. He's, I believe, associate professor of religious studies, and he covers a variety of classes from philosophy and ethics, comparative religion, and you name it, he's probably tried to teach it. So I want to turn over the evening to facilitate our conversation, Dr. James Kraft.
Hello, everybody, and I want to introduce all of you and then talk a little bit about what we want to hope to hear from you and how we can answer similar questions but add to the conversation. So in that regard, let me introduce the folks here. We have the Rabbi Neil Blumof. I'm not sure if I pronounced it right. Help me out if I didn't. Who is the lead at Agudas Achim Community. You grew up in Chicago, right?
I did.
In New Orleans?
Yep.
New York, Jerusalem, Poznan, Poland. That's a lot of different places. Wow. Associated with the Agudas Achim, as we said, and a progressive and rooted approach towards tradition, text, and prayer in consonance with Judaism since Mount Sinai, is I think the way you would put it. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
And Reverend Daryl Horton, I misunderstood where you went to school, but Daryl Horton is a native of Austin. He is youth pastor and assistant pastor at Mount Zion Baptist Church, has a Master of Arts in Theological Studies from Austin Graduate School of Theology, and a Master's of Divinity from Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary, Doctor of Ministry from Bright Divinity School at Texas Christian University, and I heard from somebody that he's a fantastic golfer. Is that true?
I'm still working on it, but I'll take it.
Still working on it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you're better than I am, I'm sure.
You might have heard it from Reverend Horton himself, I think.
Oh, he's proud of that.
Yeah, yeah.
And we have Muna Husani, who is a professional here in town, has started a new startup. Indeed, I think it is called. Am I right about that?
I don't know if I started it, but I definitely work there.
You work there. Okay, well, that's good. And I heard that you have been wearing his job ever since 9/11, and you've had many difficulties that I hope you can share with us and how you dealt with those difficulties, harassment, I guess, and discrimination. So also, Muni Hassani is a board member for Interfaith Action of Central Texas, Muslim Space, and M-Gauge. I'm not sure what that is. What is that?
So M-Gauge is it's a political organization to encourage the Muslim community to be more civically engaged.
Oh, that's awesome. Currently senior manager at a tech company. I think that's the one that I mentioned, Indeed. Is that right?
Yeah, I work there. I'm actually the chief of staff to the CTO.
Nice. And also you manage diversity and inclusion program and is responsible for launching Recharge, a return to work program for techies who have taken career breaks. I think I need a little break myself.
Don't we all?
So good to have you here with your COVID support cat. I think I'm going to get one on your recommendation.
He's
And we
attacking
have-
me right now.
Attacking? Oh, that's not so good. We also have here my dear friend, David Zuniga, Dr. David Zuniga, who is a licensed psychologist in private practice here in Austin. He has earned a master's degree in Buddhism from Harvard. And I think you were in the divinity school as well, or I think that perhaps that was at the same time you got the master's degree. Was ordained in the South Korean style of Zen Buddhism as a priest, and works as a healthcare chaplain, founder of Metta Zen Center in Austin. I think you were talking about that earlier. It's good to have you here, David. And Jagannath Vidula, very closely associated with the Austin Hindu Temple, which I've been to several times with my students. It is absolutely gorgeous. And I've watched it grow up and sprout out. And I just want to tell you, Mr. Vidula, that I was there when all you had there on the top of that hill was a huge statue of Ganesh. And now you have huge temples. It's like you're in the middle of India, in a spiritual place in India when you go to the top of that hill.
Yes, sir.
And also founding trustee of the same temple, Austin Hindu Temple and Community Center. Very involved in the community, supporting people who are disadvantaged and serving in many ways, such as religious chair for over 9 years at the temple. He has mobilized numerous people to become volunteers in his community. And I get the sense we owe a deep debt to Mr. Vidula for community development. So thank you all for being here. And I would like to give a little bit framework for what we want to discuss. But generally what we're aiming at is to get a sense of our similarities. How are we similar? How do we have similar needs and desires, but also an appreciation of our differences? So we want to balance those two things together tonight. And I thought about a certain strategy that we could think of in the spirit of the election season. Perhaps we can all think about our presentations as like campaign ads on television. You want to express what is the path that your tradition follows? What is the vision that it has? And how does your path reach out to humanity, a common humanity, people, of course, who share in a common humanity? How does your tradition address individuals? And how do you help people move towards spiritual happiness? And what is the end goal of your spiritual journey in your tradition? So in that spirit, and just as a matter of urgency in the time period we're in, we have a major election in 3 weeks, and there's a lot at stake in this election. I think nobody would doubt that. And there's a lot at stake in our lives, our spiritual lives, and in your communities. And so I'm hoping that you will talk about what your vision is. Think about yourself in a campaign ad. You want to tell people what you're all about. You want to tell people what is your vision. How are you appealing to them as fellow human beings? And how does your spiritual tradition reach out across the aisle to other religious perspectives, people of different religious orientations? There's a lot at stake. For Buddhists, what you do in this life and what you think influences what kind of next life you're going to have. Similarly, for Hindus, and what you do and think in this life for a Christian determines whether you're in heaven or hell. And for the Muslim, very similar, although actually, Muna Husani, I much prefer the Muslim view of hell because you can get out of it. Whereas if you're in the Christian hell, you can't get out of it. Maybe you could speak a little bit about that later. So hopefully we can all discuss, and we have 10 minutes. Please stay with that. If you're getting close to 10 minutes, I'll give you a little hand signal there in my window that you'll see, and that means you have 2 minutes left. So I'll kind of be keeping track. If you could, from 8 to 10 minutes would be great if you could keep it to that. But again, what is your vision of your community? Where are you taking people? The ultimate goal of where you are taking people spiritually. How is your tradition different than other traditions? Of course, if you're giving a campaign ad, you want to tell people what's unique about your tradition. And how does your tradition reach across the aisle to people of different religious orientations? What is the motivation for reaching across the aisle? And anything else that you think is urgent to talk about in this time and space. So if we could start our conversation with Rabbi Neil Blumof, and if you could give a sense of who you are and what your community is all about, that would be great.
Thank you, Dr. Kraft. I really appreciate the challenging questions and the ability to have iron sharpen iron in this conversation. So I would hope that we have a free form conversation. I certainly won't anticipate taking any more than 10 minutes, certainly at the maximum. I just wanted to lay out a few things, and then maybe we could all share a couple of ideas. As the Jewish tradition, our core text, as you may know, is called the Torah, which is the 5 books of Moses: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And from there is framed 2,000 years. You can see some of those books right behind me, 2,000 years of tradition, where we, in fact, if you learn nothing else about Judaism today, to learn that the questions actually matter much more than the answers. The questions matter much more than the answers. And to learn a little bit about Jewish history, I've been blessed to have Reverend Horton as a teacher of mine. And just last year, it just seems so long ago, Reverend Horton, that we taught a class about our mutuality in looking at the narrative of Exodus. We taught that for the Austin Seminary. So Reverend Horton we read various aspects of the Exodus from Egypt as found in the book of Exodus, of the Israelite enslaved people, and we looked at it and looked at very different ideas. So if you learn the history of the Jewish people across, we realize that we've been pawns and battered about across political systems as well as anything else. So to be able to vote, just Dr. Kraft, to address your idea, to be able to vote in an election is an incredible privilege and not something we take for granted. There were many, many hundreds of years where Jews were not allowed to do anything. So to be able to pick up from a teaching of Deuteronomy, which says that we shall not stand idly by, is very important. So just to get at some of the more specific ideas, Dr. Kraft, of your question, is the Jewish people, you were talking about envisioning concepts of heaven and hell. The Jewish idea is that we try to work as much as we can, as tirelessly as we can, on the world that we're in right now. Where our deal about the afterlife is not an assurance, nor do we believe that there's something that if we make a mistake, we're going to go to some nether world of some sort. but rather we are to pick up something called tikkun olam, which is a repair of this world, and to try our best to do that. We realize that voting is one of those mechanisms. However, you also raise something really profound, which is how do we take care of our community spiritually? So on one hand, we have to recognize that we have a civic duty and we have a responsibility to do work in this world in order to transform this world for the betterment of all. And yet at the same time, one of the way, or many of the ways that we remain in a spiritual grounding is through prayer, is through study, and is through the common recognition of relationship between and among people. So what we're always striving to do is to try to find a connection to the still small voice of God through prayer. We're also trying to live justly, and that would include voting. And the third, and perhaps the most important, is to always try to find right relationship in beloved community in order for us to feel that we are always learning and appreciating each other. So it would be as if we have a very important civic responsibility to live in this world, to get involved in this world, to get involved in ways that we can address systematic issues, the ways that we can address racism, bigotry, anti-Semitism, as well as address rights for all. And yet at the same time, to recognize that God's word transcends our generations, and for us to continue to keep an eye on the aspect of what God identifies to Moses as part of the Exodus narrative, which is Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. When Moses asks God who God is, God says, I am what I am, or I will be what I will be. And with that timeless perspective, I think is the way that we try our best to live as fully as we can in the moment, recognizing that the moment is just one aspect of God's sweet creation.
Thank you very much. That gives a good orientation on what you're all about. I've known that the Jewish faith doesn't have like a very standard for everybody view of heaven. And maybe you could talk about this a little bit later on. That's one big comparison between and among the different religious traditions. Now, if we could hear from Reverend Dale Horton, how would you talk to people to encourage them to attain spiritual happiness? And what is the vision that you have, specifically Christian vision that you have for people?
Thank you, Dr. Kraft. It's good to be here. And thank you, Rabbi, for that lead in. It seems like I'm always riding his coattails somewhere. So this is awesome tonight to get to do it again.
Step by step, Reverend Horton.
No, I would say what's cool about this is that really in following him is the idea that between our faiths, we do share the Hebrew Bible, or as most Christians would refer to it as the Old Testament. And so that's why we were able to do that class together, walking through the book of Exodus. And then in addition, in Christian faith, we have what most consider the New Testament, or the Gospels, and those that give us the life and the history of Jesus. And so those two books together, the 66 books, make up the Bible that we use. I would say that the basis of what the Christian life is about is that it focuses on love. We talk about the love that God demonstrates for humanity, which ends up in the culmination of him demonstrating love through the sacrifice of his son, Jesus, as the sacrificial lamb that comes to bring the atonement of our sins through his blood and through his sacrifice at Calvary. And so that's what we try to demonstrate, and that's what we try to extend to not just believers, but for those who are outside the faith, is that we compel others that we should love everyone, that we love them despite the differences. We love them even with our similarities, but it's that overarching love. And of course, we could go through lots of dialogue that it is what most people talk about is that agape love, the love that overrides everything, not just by relationship, not just by connection, but it's the fact that all of us are created beings by God. And so we do have the idea and the belief in both heaven and hell. We believe that because God sent his son through Christ, is that that's how we are justified. That's how we are saved. And so it is our belief in his sacrifice that gives us entrance into the kingdom of God, so that our eternal resting place after we leave here is in heaven with God. And so I think, like I said, understanding that we have a shared text, at least for half of our text is shared, I think that gives us a connection with the Jewish community. And part of what Rabbi and I talk about all the time is the idea of how, specifically as African Americans who are of the Christian faith, we can understand the suffering and we can understand slavery as we interpret that from the book of Exodus. And that's something that unites us, something that gives us hope even in the midst of current times, as our culture is very challenging for a lot of people. And so that would probably be the introduction that I would give tonight, as far as some similarities and differences.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
A common theme is this idea of heaven and hell. So perhaps we could say more about this in the Q&A or just among ourselves on the panel. Muna Husani, what kind of path do you recommend from your community? What is that spiritual path, and how does your community help people attain spiritual happiness?
All right, well, thank you, Rabbi and Reverend, for getting us started. I actually made some slides because I'm a nerd, so I'm going to share them.
Come on, Muna, seriously?
Throwing down and winning the debate, okay?
Oh, man. Had I known.
That's the spirit.
I work in tech. Leave me alone. I'm boring, okay? All right, let's see here. Share my screen. Here we go. Give me a drum roll. All right, so basic tenets of the Muslim faith. We believe in one God. Super complicated, I know. It's also important that Muslims believe in angels and that God has revealed books. The Bible, the Torah, the Quran, those are some, not all. And we also believe in prophets. Something that most people don't know about Islam is that it is an Abrahamic faith. So we believe in Abraham and Moses and Jesus. And I think that is sort of a common point and a differing point, in the sense that we believe that Jesus is a prophet. We actually believe Jesus is going to return. I think one of the differences between Islam and Christianity is, or some forms of Christianity, is we do not believe Jesus is the Son of God. And so a differing point there. Moving on, we do believe in life after death, with heaven or hell. And as Dr. James was talking about, I guess Muslims can get out of hell and go to heaven. And there are differing ways, but one of the easiest ones I think about is we have this concept of sadaqah jariyah, and it is actually part of one of the pillars. So let me talk about the pillars and I'll come back to this. So to be Muslim, you actually have to declare your faith and say, I believe in God, that God is one, and that Muhammad is his prophet and messenger. And if y'all want to repeat after me, I can include everyone and welcome y'all into the fold. Just kidding. It was a joke.
Slow your roll, Muna.
Remember, I came here to win, okay?
That's the spirit.
I'm just going with the election theme, but I'm going to do it in a civil manner with decorum, and I'll offer food too. Not a food fight, but anyways. Most Muslims have prescribed prayer times. Some pray 5 times a day, some pray 3 times a day, some only pray before a test, but you know, different strokes for different folks. And then we're supposed to give charity. So if you save any money, you are supposed to give 2.5% of that to charity, which goes to supporting the community. Now, going back to the point that Dr. James talked about before, one of the forms of charity falls into what we call sadaqah jariyah. And so, for example, if I donate to an orphanage and I help to build the orphanage, and that orphanage continues to care for orphans even after I pass away, that is a continuous giving that is still attributed to me. If I have children and those children do good their good gets attributed to me. And so your good deeds can continue to accumulate even after you pass away. And so I'll come back to this point in a second here, but like the last pillar of Islam is, if you can afford to, go to pilgrimage in Mecca. And we do that to commemorate the trials and the courage of the prophet Abraham and his esteemed wife Hagar, who was left in the desert. And so a couple of thoughts I had were around, how do we, how is our faith in service or reaching across the aisle? The slides I shared with y'all are sort of very elementary. The spirit of our faith, I believe, is gratitude. Our prayer that we're supposed to do 5 times a day is steeped in gratitude. And if you can think about a time in your life when you were truly grateful, that you were happy for what you had, how did you approach the world? How did you approach the people around you? What energy did you put out? And if you're truly in a space of gratitude, you are really in service, in love, in empathy to those around you, the things around you, the world that you're part of. And I think that's really what the spirit of Islam is all about, that sort of togetherness and being in service. Because we believe the only difference between any two people are their deeds. And nothing else differentiates anyone. And so, like, what are you trying to do? Intention is another really big piece. So what are you trying to do matters just as much, if not more, than maybe what actually happened. And that's another component that I think is part of our religion, is there's a lot of hope, because it's not just the actions you took, but like your sincerity. If you truly repent, God forgives you. So, those things that when you go to bed at night and they stay in your mind and you're like, oh, why did I do that? Oh, I regret that so much. If you are sincere in your belief, and it's not like you keep doing the same thing over and over, and you know when you mean it and when you don't mean it. And if you sincerely repent and you sincerely try to be better, that effort means a lot, and you're not just carrying around the weight of everything you've done. And I guess I'll just finish by saying one thing. There are 1.8 billion followers of Islam in the world. So maybe we don't see them all here in the US, but we are 25% of the world. Most Muslims globally are Asian, not Arab. Fun fact. And then most Muslims in the United States are Asian. And the second largest group of Muslim Americans are African Americans. And because slaves were part of the founding story of this country, Islam's story also starts here with those that were enslaved. And Muslims speak hundreds of languages, have lots of different cultures, food, and religious practices, and not everyone practices Islam the same way. And I will end by saying we reach across the aisle because we have the best food. Back to you, Dr. James.
The best food I've ever had is in Istanbul, so I agree with you on that one.
There you go.
Una, what'd you have for dinner tonight? I'm just curious.
The best food.
The best food. No, we had Freebirds.
That's good.
Exactly. Exactly.
I didn't say I make the best food. I said we have the best food.
That's all right. You're still winning. That's okay.
Norton's making,
we're going to
Norton's making a bunch of slides right now. He's got food slides. He totally does.
We're going to turn to the far west. Far east, I meant to say. I don't know what got in me that moment. Anyway, so we're going to go to the far east, and we're going to learn a little bit about Buddhism right now at the hands of David Zuniga, Dr. David Zuniga. So, Dr. Zuniga, what is the path you recommend your community members to go on, and how can that help us achieve spiritual happiness? What is the end goal?
Sure. So great question. So I'm a Zen Buddhist priest. And for those who aren't as familiar with Zen or Buddhism in general, the Cliff Notes answer would be, I think Buddhism is kind of a Unitarianism with a lot of meditation, is the way I would describe it. And to kind of say a little something about myself, so I am a psychologist in my day job, and which I love. And I see my work as a psychologist as congruent with my Zen practice. And I would say too, and if I have time, I'll elaborate a little bit. I think that the Buddha in the Pali Canon is kind of the Old Testament of Buddhism. The Pali Canon is the oldest collection of texts that we have in existence today that describes Buddhism. In the Pali Canon, I think the Buddha tried in his own way to formulate the philosophy and practice of Buddhism with science as they understood it in their day 2,500 years ago. I was ordained in South Korea as a Zen Buddhist priest. And I say that because if you're familiar with Buddhism, you might be most familiar with Tibetan Buddhism, which is really great, and His Holiness the Dalai Lama. A lot of Buddhism is like Roman Catholicism in that if you're going to be ordained, you have to be fully ordained, you have to be celibate. I'm like a Protestant Buddhist. I'm married, probably like Reverend Horton or Rabbi Neil. I'm fully ordained and I'm married. My lineage of Korean Zen is, and a lot of Japanese Zen allows married clergy. And so I'm married. I'm kind of a householder in that way. I have a wife and 2 kids, a mortgage, probably like a lot of y'all. I'm Zen Buddhist, just like in Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism. There's lots of different denominations and schools and all those other sacred traditions. Same with Buddhism. There's lots of different kinds of Buddhism. I was ordained in the Taego lineage of Korean Zen. The term Zen, translated into English, literally means it's a style of meditation that kind of, the Pali term is jhana, and it kind of means absorptive concentration. So the idea of Zen is twofold. In the practice of Zen, you get in these deep, 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 deep states of concentration meditation that blossoms into what we call mindfulness. And mindfulness is very popular in the West. Mindfulness is huge in psychology. My dissertation in psychology was on the intersections of Buddhism, mindfulness, and psychology. And I was pretty boring, like a lot of grad students. Little fun fact, the single biggest, at least when I did my PhD, and I think it's true to this day, the single biggest source of dissertation topics in psychology is mindfulness. So it's huge. And there's a lot of research on neuroplasticity, the brain, and mindfulness, as well as mindfulness and depression, anxiety, addiction, interpersonal functioning. It is worth stating that when mindfulness was originally conceived by the Buddha in the Pali Canon, it's kind of like mindfulness in the West has become like the Olive Garden of Italian food. Mindfulness has become almost a victim of its own success. And so, I mean, in a sense, mindfulness is applicable to everything in human existence, but I do think there's a danger in it getting watered down, quite frankly. When mindfulness was originally formulated, it's said in the mythology of Buddhism that the historical Buddha was this rich prince, and he kind of lived this sheltered life of privilege and ease. And it's said that one night he went out, he snuck out beyond the castle walls, and he saw an ancient person, a very sick person, and then a person who had just died. And the Buddha was devastated by this, kind of seeing the universal existential challenges of human existence, that there is aging, suffering, grief, and death to human existence. And so the Buddha said that he would, and so here's kind of the goal of Buddhism to answer James's question. The Buddha said that he would set out to seek a path to alleviate the suffering of humanity, or he would die trying. And what the Buddha came up with was mindfulness and other styles of meditation and mindfulness philosophy. I would say too, I appreciate James's, James is so like innovative in his religious dialogue, like a campaign ad. In general, Buddhism is non-proselytizing. We don't always live up to the aspirations of our tradition, but in general, Buddhism, we seek to give with an open hand. And that's another kind of connection between psychology and Buddhism. A lot of times when people do psychotherapy, they think there's just one type of therapy. Just a little tidbit, there's actually over 400 schools of different kinds of therapy out there. So just as an FYI, if it ever doesn't work with one therapist, there's all kinds of different styles of therapy out there. And so too, as a Buddhist priest, I don't think my job as a Zen priest is to convert people to Buddhism. I don't think Buddhism is the only true way. I think that it depends on what is the most skillful thing for the person in the moment. You know, the best religion is the one that works for the individual person based on their values, their beliefs, their cultural backgrounds, their challenges, and their aspirations. I believe that as a psychologist, and I believe that as a Buddhist. I would say too, it's interesting because James kind of brought up the idea of rebirth and afterlife. It's a complex question, but in the Pali Canon, the historical Buddha was asked flat out if we have a soul, if there's an afterlife, if we survive after death. And what the Buddha actually said in the Pali Canon was he didn't answer the question, because he said, one, the question of if we have a soul and if we have an afterlife is not fundamental to the practice of Buddhism. Buddhism is about the transformation of suffering, the cultivation of joy, and the cultivation of a purposeful life. The Buddha said that whether there's an afterlife or not is not a central concern of Buddhism. And he actually didn't answer the question, and he said this flat out, because he didn't want to give people something to get attached to. And that's kind of a unique perspective, I think, for Westerners sometimes. But in Buddhism, we would say, and so this is kind of one of the central ideas of Zen. Zen was kind of founded on this idea that words, language, and concepts are never the thing in and of themselves. That words are at best fingers pointing at the moon, but they are not the moon itself. And personally, I do believe that to be true. I think whatever we believe of ultimate reality can never be fully expressed in language. So Buddhism sought to get out of the trap of words and language. And I'm aware of the irony that as I'm describing this, I'm using words, language, concepts to convey this. But hopefully my words and language or concepts are skillful players to help convey some truth. But I guess kind of the essence of Buddhism too, beyond, transforming suffering and cultivating purposeful living, is what we call the Four Noble Truths. And I'll end on this for the moment. The Buddha kind of came up with what we call the Four Noble Truths. The first noble truth is that life involves suffering. We can live it. There is randomness to this world. We can live in and I used to see this. I worked for about 15 years as a chaplain in palliative care and hospice. Then I became a psychologist. You know, we live in a world where little babies can get cancer. We live in a world where a pandemic can sweep across the world suddenly and kind of inexplicably. We also live in a world where there's profound joy and goodness. All these things exist together. But the first noble truth of Buddhism is that life involves suffering. The second noble truth is that suffering comes from desire. And that's kind of a key concept. The third noble truth is that desire and suffering can be overcome. And the fourth noble truth is the path of overcoming suffering. And I'll just elaborate briefly and then I'll wrap up just to be under 10 minutes. Life involves suffering. That's kind of a diagnosis of the problem. Suffering comes from desire. That's like an etiology of the problem, the source of the disease. And desire isn't a bad thing. I like free birds as well. I like breakfast tacos. I like jazz and blues. I do think Buddhists have the best food, respectfully. Beat Asian, baby. But anyways, but Muslim food, also Asian food. But we're all
You're entitled to your own opinions, not your facts. Okay.
So now we're getting into it. We're in the real school. But anyways.
This is such a throwdown right now. I love this.
I actually used the debate line, Neil. Okay, keep going. Sorry. I'm
That's
cutting into your 10 minutes.
That's all right. Yeah. I was going to pull a Kamala Harris and say, no, I'm just kidding. But yeah, suffering comes from desire. We can desire all kind of things, you know, like right now I'm drinking delicious sparkling water. I love sparkling water. The problem with suffering comes when we cling to things in a way that goes against how they will inevitably change. So that's kind of the key. But again, the etiology of the condition is that suffering comes from desire. The prognosis is an optimistic one, that suffering can be overcome, and then you have the treatment plan, the methodology for overcoming suffering. So you can see, like if you have like the 10 Commandments in Christianity or the Torah, or these kind of seminal Hero Israel, the Lord is your God, the Lord is one, these kind of the 4 pillars of Islam. You have these seminal truths. A summation of Buddhist philosophy is the 4 Noble Truths, which Buddha tried to reach in his empirical understanding of science in the day. So again, the goal of Buddhism, I would say, is to help people where they're at. As His Holiness the Dalai Lama said, my religion is kindness. But if you kind of wanted to say a couple key goals to answer James's question, it would be to alleviate suffering, to cultivate joy, and to cultivate purposeful living. That's the essence of Buddhism. Thank you, my friends.
Thank you, Dr. Zuniga.
You can call me Dave.
Dave, my friend Dave. Now, let's go to South Asia now and hear from Jagannath Padula. I see your temple there in the background, the Hindu temple. And what is a distinct pathway that you have at the Hindu temple, the Austin Hindu temple? How is it different than the other pathways that we've been talking about so far? How do you help people get spiritual happiness and the end goal?
Thank you, sir. It's a great question. Let me first start with the basic concept of Hinduism. Hinduism is one of the oldest religion, dates back to 1500 BC. And then the main concept of Hinduism is karma, dharma, and punarjanma. Karma is your duty, basically the law of karma, cause and effect. For every action, there is a reaction. So for anything that you do, there is a karmic reaction that comes to you. And one of the biggest things that they teach here in Hinduism is it's not a religion, it's a way of life. Okay, the way you do everything, it's the religion, Hinduism is so built into the day-to-day life and into everything a person does that it's part of life. Okay, and in this, again, Dr. David was talking about suffering and the causes of suffering. What they teach in Hinduism, suffering is caused by expectations. When your expectations are not met, you are disappointed, you suffer. So in the path of karma, it said that you just do your duty without being attached to the fruits or the results of what you are doing. If you are attached, then you have expectations, and then you have a disappointment or suffering if that doesn't happen. So one of the things that differentiate is one is put a ceiling on desires. There is desires. Everybody has desires. There is desire. Everybody needs everything. Okay, but how do you differentiate between what is a need, what is a want, and where do you draw a line? That's one of the things that's there. Dharma is basically its principle of righteousness in the terms of the moral code of conduct. Karma is the law of cause and effect. These two go hand in hand in everything that you do. Okay, and based on this, the whole religion is explained. It's everything that you do, your duty, anything that you do, it has to follow it has to be in this path. There are multiple ways of reaching, even though we believe in one God, but because of the God is infinite, attributes are many, we can take any attribute that pleases, any form that pleases, it is still that one God. One of the things that is different from other religions is most of the religions have one, two, or a few books. In Hinduism, there are numerous books. It's almost like a library of books. You can take any one, and that will lead you there. The paths are different. Those who want to do just by knowledge, by enlightenment, they have a method, they have a way of reaching by Jnana Marga, just by knowledge. Those who want to do by service, just serve others and reach there, then there is a path for that too. Then Bhakti Marga, those who want to pray in devotion, do that too. There are many ways to reach the same goal. And what else? In general, we have in India, I think 28 states, 29 states, hundreds of languages, thousands of dialects. Every state is different. Every state, the food is different. So the way of living is different. The way of prayer is different. So Muna, we have probably the largest collection of food. I don't know if it is the best, but it is the
Something about
largest.
food tonight.
Listen, there's an
Largest collection
intersection,
of
okay?
food.
There's an
Indian food
intersection.
is awesome.
So I can include you in the fold, all right?
Okay, okay. So that's fine then. So we are on the same team now. Okay, good.
What,
So-
you can't have alliances now. Like, what's going on? Like, what's happening? Like, what are we doing?
So
Stay
one
in
of
your
the-
lane.
One of the biggest thing about human life in Hinduism is that human birth is the most sacred. And with this about 8.4 million different species of living beings, human life is at the top, okay? And the purpose of the life is to reach him, or to be liberated from this cycle of life and birth and rebirth, and to reach him. And the whole process of whatever we do in this life and beyond is always to reach him. And it's like, that's why it's called the way of life. It's like a lamb or a goat tied to a post, okay, a pillar. You have your freedom, you do whatever you do, you go around, but you're still tied to that. It's like that, whatever you do in your life, that faith and your religion are part of it. Anything and everything you do revolves around that. And one has to pass through all of these forms, different forms, to reach the human life. Hence, it is the most important, and this life should be in his service and to reach him. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janath Velula. Really interesting perspectives. And we have a little bit of extra time. If I might use my position as moderator to ask a particular question that
Sure.
I'd love to see everybody respond to. Actually, it's something I agonize about every day almost. And that is, what's going to happen to me next after I die? And I know so many of my students are interested in this topic. And I really, really, really want to believe that I have a soul, and I'm going to see my grandmother in the next life in heaven. And I have a dog named Penny that I really loved when I was a kid. And hopefully dogs get to heaven. But what about this desire? I know, Dr. Zuniga, you're going to say, I'm overly craving my essence as a soul, and that's not such a good thing. It's going to bring upon suffering ultimately. And Rabbi Blumof, I know you're going to say something like, well, you know, the afterlife, we're not too worried about that. Actually, you said that already. And the point is to live well in this life and have God approve of what you're doing in this life. And Muna Hassani, I mean, it's very Christian, have very similar to a Christian idea of heaven that we look forward to. Although what's cool about heaven, Muslim heaven, is you're going to be drinking a lot of good things and you're going to be eating a lot of good things. That's my understanding of heaven. And I already told you that I like the Muslim view of hell. Although I will add, Muni Hassani, I will add that when I was teaching in Istanbul, I had a group of students that assured me that I could never get to heaven if you believe Jesus is God. Maybe you can respond to this. And there's a particular passage in the Quran that says something very, very explicitly like that. You can't get to heaven if you believe Jesus is God. Dr. Horton, I mean, you're in my ballpark. As a Christian, I'm not a very good Christian. I'm trying to be a better Christian. But, and I know Jagardath Badullah, you're going to say we have multiple lifetimes and our end goal is moksha, as you said earlier. So what do you all think? I mean, how do you talk to somebody who has this quandary? You all represented very different views about the ultimate goal of our existence. I mean, how am I to decide, and what do you have to say about that? Could we hear from everybody on that particular issue? I'm having an existential crisis. I need some help here. And others that I know need help as well.
Well, the Jewish response would be just come and eat, we'll feed you. So totally, doesn't really matter which food at this point. So just saying. But no, Micha, the prophet, do good work and walk humbly before God. And, I think there's some really amazing ideas. Each of us have an hour, Dr. Kraft, for this question, because do we have to like 8 or 9 or 10?
Not quite that long.
Not quite that long?
Not quite that long.
It's a big question,
right?
But it's a question that my students ask, and some of them are listening now, and actually they're going to be listening to the recording. I mean, what do we have to look forward to? I mean, I know that Jewish people don't have a very standard idea of heaven.
Well, if you want to find reincarnation in Judaism, you can find it. If you want to find resurrection in Judaism, you can find it. The way that I look at it is actually a much more mystical thing, and I'll just be very brief because I know there's lots of wisdom to be shared. There is a concept of God. I gave you a name of God earlier that said, I am what I am, or I will be what I will be. And Dr. Zuniga, or Dave, sorry, you and I could probably agree, and Jagannath, we could probably agree on a lot of that. There's another name of God, which is a mystical name of God, which is the infinite. It's called Ein Sof. And our energy, while our body returns to the earth, our energy, our soul, our essence returns to the divine being. So the aspect of, are we going to recognize, as you said, Dr. Kraft, various relatives of ours or pets of ours? It might be in the larger whole, in the larger composite. But this idea of the Ein Sof, this idea of God's energy sort of being what we are not as human beings, it's everything else, I think is really, really important. So again, we do the best we can in this world. The Psalms speak about it very clearly. One who has passed away cannot praise God. That's Psalm 118. So the idea that we recognize that there are angels, as Muna was saying so beautifully, that praise God all the time. We try to navigate the world beyond this world, and the world's in this world. I could speak for a while, but let me just say that this may be just one form of our existence, the world that we know now. And there are other worlds beyond this world, typified by the Ein Sof, or the infinite, that we would just learn about once our life in this world is over.
Thank you so much.
I guess we'll stick with the same order, I suppose. So yeah, I would say that part of the hope that you have is that the Hebrew Bible and even the New Testament teach us that God desires to have relationship with humanity. And so we believe that part of what Genesis teaches us is that we are made in the image of God. And part of that we believe would be having a soul or having a spirit, not just the thing that differentiates us from animals having the intelligence and the ability to think and to do those type of things. But we believe as well that you have that soul, that spirit that does return to God as the body returns back to the dust of the earth. And so I think one of the foundations of the Christian faith is that we put trust in the fact that we live in a fallen world where we have challenges. There are obstacles that we have to overcome. There's death, there's fear, there are all of these things. But through having a relationship with God, our hope and our belief is that when this life is over, when this physical body decays, as the Apostle Paul likes to say it, when this tabernacle, when this vessel is dissolved and is no more, he says we have a new building that's not made by human hands, and that God has made that for us, just as the psalmist David would say that when he gets through walking through the valley of the shadow of death, that he knows that he will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And so we believe that that's where God would have us to be. That's what gives us hope. That's what gives us the ability to look beyond the suffering of this time, to know that there is another place, as the book of Revelation would talk about, where there is no more suffering, there are no more tears, there's no more death. And so in Christianity, we don't work to get to that place, but we put our trust in faith that God has already done what is sufficient. And so we don't believe that there's enough work that we can do. We don't believe there's enough good that we can do. We believe that it is through our belief and through our faith that heaven will be our resting place once this is over for our souls. And so that would be the hope, I would say, Dr. Kraft, is that as we endure everything we endure here, our hope is that this is temporary, just as this flesh is, and that there is an eternal place where we will be returned to the Creator.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great idea. That's the idea that I'm running with right now. But I listened to the Buddhist message, which says, find out for yourself if you have a soul or not through meditation. And I do follow the Buddhist strategy of figuring out what is the case about me by meditation. And I don't find a soul. So, I mean, Dr. Horton, I wish I could, but David Zuniga, David, could you say a little bit more about this? I mean,
Sure.
A soul to look forward to, an essence of who we are that will exist in heaven. Dr. Zuniga?
Well, so we have a bunch of ideas on the table. What I would say, and I appreciate Rabbi Blumhoff, I think we probably need like a graduate course per tradition just to start to scratch the soul of what we're talking about. What I would,
I see what you did there, Dave. That was nice. Soul. Love that.
I'm a fan of all of you. You guys, and I mean that seriously. I've had a chance to work with all of you, except Muna, who's a good friend of my wife's. So if you're a friend of my wife's, I'm your fan, and I mean that sincerely. Like, all of you are beautiful people, and I'm glad we're here today. So, anyways, I feel very close to all of you. What I would actually say is, I would say, believe in what's skillful for you. Like, again, I'm kind of mixing psychology and Buddhism, but I do think, and even a lot of folks, so there's research suggesting even people on the ground in Asia see Buddhism as a form of psychology. And I would say, like with my clients who come to see me in therapy, I say, let's help you live authentically in the world according to your own freely chosen goals and values. And so if somebody's on their deathbed, I'll be really straight with y'all. I've worked with people who are atheists, and I've worked with people who are conservative Christian or Muslim, kind of fundamentalist traditions, and everywhere in between. And I can tell you definitively, honest to God, no pun intended, atheist or Christian, you can have a good death. It's more just what, like James was saying, what works for you. And that's what the Buddha said in the Pali Canon. Don't believe anything until you check it out for yourself and it works for you. And so if you want to believe in heaven, believe in heaven. If you want to believe in rebirth, believe in rebirth. And by the way, and I mean this with utter respect, like as a Buddhist, I look at the Bible and I say, well, that's a rebirth text. Like, you have Jesus, right? Jesus is up in heaven. He takes human form. The Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. He lives for 30-ish years, depending on which gospel you're reading. He's then crucified. He rises from the dead 3 days later. He teaches for a while. He ascends into heaven and he'll come back. That's rebirth. In my Asian philosophy mind, that's rebirth. And I mean that with respect. There's so much that connects us, We can focus on our differences or we can focus on our commonalities. But what I say to people when they're dying, like my clients in my psychology practice today, is what do you believe in your heart to be true? And then what can we do to make those beliefs a lived experiential reality? Because you're Muslim, you're Christian, you're Jewish, you're Hindu, you're Buddhist, you're Taoist, you're Lakota Sioux, you're secular humanist, existential philosopher, whatever it is, I think it's all equally good. And so the beliefs are one thing, but respectfully, I think we almost focus on beliefs a little too much. It's behaviors, rituals that matter. What are the things you do? Contemplative prayer,
So it's skillful means.
Yeah.
I get that. And what helps you in a particular situation, I totally get that. But I really want to know if I have a soul and if I'm going to get to heaven. Muni
Right.
Hassani, can you help me out here? What is your view from your
Can I
perspective?
say one other thing along those lines? Because you brought up the no self thing. Buddhism does have the idea of no self, which is there's no one thing that makes us who we are. And so when we say there's no self, that's actually an expansion of the self. We are interconnected. We are part and parcel of everything in the universe. And meditation is absolutely a vehicle that can make that happen. So thank you, my friends.
That's awesome. I'm going to think about that. No self is the extension of the self as well. I love that.
Yeah.
But Muna Hassani, I mean, do we have a soul and is there a heaven?
Yes and yes. I'm done. Free food for everyone. Going back to what we've been talking about, actually, David, one of the things you just said really resonated with me around what are the practices that you're in, because it goes back to sincerity. And I don't have the deep knowledge that the Rev and the Rav have around religion. I'm a lay person. But what comes up for me when you're asking this question about what is going to happen to me is that we have this belief in Islam. Take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, that if there were 100 parts of love, God kept 99 and sent one part down on earth. And when I think about being a mother and the way my children are with me, no matter what they do, I still love them. And I'm only one person of the billions on the face of earth, right? And if I think about God and God's love, I don't see love as being something that is rigid. The more love there is, the more fluidity there is, the more compassion there is, the more forgiveness there is. So, going back to that statement you said about what your students in Istanbul said, that statement flies in the face of love. There is more than one way into the heart. That, you must, these 3 steps and that is it. And I believe God is a loving God. And I don't think things are that black and white. I am also not a scholar. And I think that you walk the path you walk, and that path will take you where it is. And at the end of the day, you know where you've walked, you know what you've done, and you know what's in your heart. We also have another saying that I think it was like on the day of judgment, when all of the people have been judged, there's one last person. And that last person is told they're going to hell. And then they start to walk in that direction. They turn around and look at God and said, I thought you'd be more forgiving. And then God says something like, you're right, and puts him into the other line. Because it's like, what did you think of? What did you try for? Where was your heart? Where was your sincerity? Like, there is so much that is in our choice and our path and predestination. And like I said, I'm not a scholar. I'm just giving you my lay way of thinking about these things. But that was just what was coming up for me when I was hearing the question you asked and what David and the Rev and the Rav said.
Okay, I'm gonna take note of what you said and comfort in what you said, that God is flexible and there are many different ways to love and address and attach to God. So I'm gonna take that as a comfort. Mr. Vidula, before we talk to students and see, or other people that are here, they're not necessarily students, but before we open it up to other people, what is that you hope for? You don't have a heaven, but you have something like a soul. Am I right or wrong?
Yes, there is heaven, there is soul.
Okay. You work your way up the ladder in different lifetimes, right? If you're doing well, getting good karma.
Correct.
Okay. Well, let's see what others are thinking. Some other people, anybody have a question to the panel or want to pursue a line of thinking?
We could also share recipes if you'd like.
Yes.
That might be dangerous though. I can't see everybody at the same time, but go ahead.
I was just gonna say, are we done soon? Should we open up for questions to the audience?
Yeah, that's what I'm doing right now, just to see if anybody else who hasn't spoken would like to present a question or a line of thinking to the panel, please.
Hello, my name is Juan Zuniga. I wanted to say something.
Yeah, please.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Juan Zuniga. I'm a 2020 graduate of Huston Tillotson University. Go Rams. I graduated with a degree in English. Yes. A degree in English and a minor in education. So I'm a bilingual tutor. I used to work on religious life staff. So Civility Week is something I was tasked with, and I'm happy to be here and learning from you all. I just feel really profound right now to have the blessing to be a part of religious diversity, right? Because so often we go in America and we fall short of actually encompassing every religion. So I think this is really cool because I don't think we get to have these conversations every day. But to get to my point, first, I want to say thank you to Muna, I believe your name is, because I think the Islam faith, right, is really beautiful. It's something I'm very fond of. And I think just a lot of the things you said resonated with me. So I'm Mexican on both ends of maternal and paternal, right? So my culture is, I guess my religion is like something I live by, is how I wake up. I pray to God, I pray to Jesus. I also do pray to the Virgin Mary or Guadalupe, however you want to say it. So I do encompass some aspects of Catholic and Christian in my own faith. And I guess just to kind of speak on this line of questioning of saying, you know, what happens in our afterlife, what happens after we die? I think right now we're encompassing it. I believe that we are, our ancestors lived through us, right? So what we're doing now is our life's mission. So if we're in equity work, if we're in civility work, if we're called to the teaching profession, I think this is the work we're going to do in our afterlife. Like this, it's already predetermined. What you're doing now is, I think, what God's going to call you afterwards. I'm a photographer also, so I hope God has me do photography in heaven, because I love to take pictures, and if I could get paid to do that for the rest of my life, I would. But unfortunately, I have to teach during COVID-19, and it's tough. But yeah, I just wanted to share those thoughts, and thank y'all for being here.
Thanks, Juan. Any relation to our friend, Dr. Zuniga, David?
No, but I think that's God's way of telling me that I'm going to be a doctor one day. So I'm hopefully.
You talk like a doctor, so I think that's going to happen. And I loved having you in my class. Anybody else? We have time for a couple more questions. If anybody is chomping at the bit to ask something and get a response.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Surinder Lockridge. I am a sophomore at Huston Tillotson University. I am one of the leaders of Religious Life and Campus Ministry. I am one of the hosts of Civility Week. I do appreciate y'all so much for being here. I had to step away from the computer and came right back. I hope no one asked this question, but my question was, so how is the friendship between the different religions? How comfortable is that? If my question is like making sense, how comfortable is it having, like, I have a friend that is Christian, have a friend with this background and this background. Where does the line draw with respect?
I'll offer my thoughts, and I know everybody has a lot to offer. I'll just say briefly that I think diversity is our greatest strength, and I have friends who are atheists, I have friends who are Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Hindu. I think it's all equally good, honestly, and I think I learn a lot from other traditions, and other traditions make me a better Buddhist. So yeah, and I definitely, my goal as a psychologist or as a Buddhist is to help people live in congruence with their own freely chosen goals and values. So I think there can be more than one truth, and I don't feel any conflict at all.
Can I go next? In Hinduism, we talk about Vasudeva Kutumbakam. It is the universal brotherhood. Whatever you believe in, the first and foremost thing it teaches you is to be a good human. If you are one, the rest doesn't matter. So you strive to be a good human and compassionate good human, and then everything else falls in place. So there is no difference with who you are, what you are, as long as you do not start arguing my religion or my God is better than yours or bigger, better. If you don't get into that, everything is fine. There is nothing to even discuss, because most of them teach you the same thing, different methods, but the goal is the same, the teaching is the same, very similar.
Surinder, I would say, what a great question. And what I would tell you is that I would agree with the others in saying that there is great value in diversity. In being a Christian, I've gained so much in the friendship that I have with Muna and with Rabbi Blumoff, because both of them teach me every time we have dialogue together. There are blind spots that I have, and there are things that I've just known because that's what I've been taught since I was a child. But one thing that helps is that when you talk with people of other faiths, one of the things it can do is that it'll help challenge what you believe, maybe not even so much to sway you from it, but it could also help to strengthen what you believe by hearing what others talk about. And so I appreciate the fact that we can do those types of things. Also, I think what you've learned from the call tonight is that there are so many commonalities and similarities. One of the things I love to do at Mount Zion is that we're doing Bible study right now, walking through the book of Genesis. And one of my favorite taglines is to tell the church, I had a good conversation with Rabbi the other day, and here's what he believes about this text. And for some of them, their eyes get big, but it's the idea of understanding that we're looking at the same text, we believe the same text, and there's value in understanding how other people see it, because there's growth and maturity in that. I think part of where your question can also become challenging is that because we understand each other and we respect each other so much, there are lines and there are things that we know not to cross. I mean, Rabbi and I have a really good relationship, and we can joke about a lot of things, but I would never offend him by inviting him to something that I know would totally be offensive to what he believes. And so those things, I don't know them though, unless I have a relationship with him. I would make sure not to intentionally say something to offend Muna, but I can only do that because of the relationship that we have. So I think there's great value in us learning so that you can have a greater understanding and a greater intellect about all the religions of the world. And you can't do that unless you experience it with other people. But I would also say that if you spend all of your life with people who believe exactly the same way that you believe, then your life is going to end up pretty shallow, because you're only going to know what you've always known.
Excellent words of cooperation among different religious oriented people. I'm aware that we're out of time, it looks like, but Chaplain Brewington, would you like to bring us together and sort of tell us what you valued about our conversation and give us some parting words?
Sure. It looked like for a
Hey,
moment.
Donald?
Yes.
I'd be remiss if I didn't jump in here. I actually wanted to say something to Surrender. I'll keep it short. You know, Surrender, there are a lot of lines between our communities. Real talk. I believe those lines are there because people are human, and when people struggle, they separate. And one of the easy ways to separate is across religious lines. My people, your people. And that happens all of the time. It doesn't matter if it's a matter of faith or race or where you live, what side of the railroad tracks. And back to what the Reverend Horton said is that if we are in a place where we're building relationship, not only can we be friends, but we can be allies or co-conspirators for each other. And I think that's the place that all of us would like to say we occupy, right? And, you know, case in point, I've actually been to Israel with Rabbi Blumoff, right? Muslims and Jews working together. It's not necessarily something you think about. We've, I think, both been criticized for the work that we've also done. And and we have lots of stories to tell, but we still do it because I think we believe that we have to struggle through for a better future. And I actually believe our faith collectively informs that, and we have to stay in conversation for us to be effective, because at the end of the day, like what David said, I think we all believe the same things and we want the same ways. Maybe the paths look a little bit different. So I just wanted to mention that. Thank you for letting me take some time from you, Donald.
Yeah, so this is a really important topic here, and somebody else on the panel might want to weigh in on this. Before we turn it over to the chaplain to give us parting words, anybody else want to speak to this issue of how we get along across the aisle?
I would just say this, and I wanted to thank again the wisdom and the curiosity, not only of the panelists, but those who are here. Juan and Surrender, thank you for your voices, and Reverend Brewington, Chaplain Brewington, thank you so much for bringing us together. And I would the only thing I would add in terms of the welcome and the challenges and the goals that we have is to not get discouraged, and to recognize that that kind of connection, those kinds of explorations, are very important and can be very helpful for us in determining who we are in our identity as well. So while Muna and I might think about things in the Middle East, let's say, Reverend Horton and I think about things here in America, and we have had engaged very important conversations about what does it mean not only to be an African American, what does it mean to be Jewish in America, but what does it mean to know of each other's experiences? So I think this idea of curiosity, this idea of strength in recognizing and holding each other's space and reality is the greatest gift. And that translates very well to our communities, to our schools, to our families, and changes our life. So my blessing would be that we do not give up, and that we keep our hand on the plow, as it were, and that we continue to make our way together, no matter the slings and arrows of those who might deride us out of their own fear. So may we continue to learn from each other and gain fresh insights as we continue to explore not only who we are, but who we are together.
And I'll just say super briefly, I'm just blown away by everybody's wisdom and compassion. And when I heard Reverend Darrell speaking a second ago, in my Buddhist mind, I totally appreciated what he said. And I thought, we just need to get over our own ego attachments. You know, I don't have all the answers, but I can definitely try and learn from other people. And I just want to say too, you know, there's kind of real talk, as Muna would say, there's voices of racism and violence in our society today. There's also voices of love and compassion and wisdom bringing people together. And there's shocking, traumatic things in the news, but there's also really beautiful things happening in our society. And so we want to ground ourselves in the good. And I just want to say thank you to the fellow panelists, Reverend Brewington, my good friend James Kraft, and all of you. This is the kind of stuff we need to do in our society, you know, coming together to celebrate our shared humanity and common goodness. our diversity as a nation is our greatest strength as a nation. And I just love what we're doing tonight, and I just feel a lot of gratitude for you all. So thank you.
Amen to that.
Amen. So be it. Yes.
Any other comments here? On last
They
evening,
still
we
have
had
the best food.
we're going to come to your table. On last evening, we had an event, and it was titled "A Seat at the Table." What we seek to provide is a seat at the table, and everyone needs to come to the table. I understand that somewhere, as we see our young folk, we talk about old folk in a new generation. History teaches us things. As we find ourselves engaging now, we need to find a seat at the table. Actually, that's what Martin Luther King did. If we look at the civil rights movement, it was not just a Black movement. We found Jewish rabbis there. We found Islamic folk there. We found people from all faith communities who were a part of that effort, and they all had a seat at the table in an effort to make things different. As we continue to move through society, as we find ourselves where we are today, how do we find our expressions through our faith? And how do we come together in those faith practices and beliefs and find unity so that we can deal with the issues of society as one family or one community with diverse beliefs? I want to thank and take the time to thank our students and our guests who took the time to join us this evening. I appreciate your presence here. Those who are part of Dr. Craft's class, thank you, Dr. Craft, Brother James, for giving them extra credit for being here today. We do appreciate that. I want to continue to thank Juan and Surrender. They are phenomenal young people, and they have done a tremendous job this week. I want to especially thank you, our guests for this evening, Neil, Daryl, Jagannath, Muna, David. I thank each of you. I've enjoyed engaging many of you throughout the community, different events and activities. It's been a blessing to be in your presence and to get to know you. And thank you, James, for agreeing to serve as moderator on this evening. Praise God for you, and may his blessings be upon each of you. Thank you for being with us, and pray that you have a tremendous and a blessed tomorrow and rest of the weekend. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, friends. Stay safe, everyone.
Can y'all stay really quick for a picture? I want to take a screenshot. Hold on, don't leave. Rev asked me to
Take a
do.
screenshot.
Sorry,
Put
Rev,
your-
I'm
put
trying to
your
do it on my.
video back on.
Yes. Stay. Hold on. I have to log into my computer. Give me like literally.
I can actually do it from our laptop. I'm already on here. So if
Go ahead,
You
Surrender.
need to get young folk around you, because I don't know how to do half of that, and they take up the slack.
I got you. So I'm gonna do it in one.
Hey, Surrender.
It'll be
Surrender.
Photoshop.
Turn your screen on so we can see you.
Okay. Okay. Give me one.
If
People are showing up.
Yeah.
And if there are
Yeah.
others who are willing to turn on your screen so we can see you, it would be awesome.
I'm just gonna turn on that phone real quick, and I do look decent.
Even if you cover your eyes, it's okay.
You know, there's research that seeing an image of someone who cares about you can lower pain. So
There's Surrender. Look at that. Hey.
All right, let's do
Everybody.
it.
Kabi, Donald, can we get some video?
It's recorded, yes.
All right, I'm about to screenshot in 1, 2, 3.